In the previous video, we created a document and we created a header or a tile. This one doesn't have a logo to be put in, but if you did have a logo, I would suggest just making this a bit smaller and putting your logo in here. It doesn't matter left or right, but generally if you put it at the top next to the title, you're going to be fine. Okay. So at the moment that looks pretty plain, just plain text. There's a couple of things that I'm going to strongly recommend we do. The first one is I'm going to change my typeface. I'm going to pick a text style from here. I'm going to pick something. If you read the typography tutorial on the VLE, you'll see there's a whole section about which type of fonts to use. The simple rule is if you're doing blocks of text, so paragraphs and things like that, you want to use a text that's a serif type font. So you can see this one, for instance, has got, it's not a very good one. Let's have a quick look at, so for instance, this Bookman Old Style, you can see it's got the little feet. I'm going to just select that as my title there. You can see if I zoom in that it's got things like these little feet at the bottom of the F and the R and so on, little marks here. These are called serifs, and this is a serif font. And for this type of task, you want to be using serif fonts. The other type of font is what we call a sans serif, which is without the serifs, and that would be something like Arial, for instance. If I go to Arial, you can see that it doesn't have the little feet at the bottom of the Fs and things like that. This would be more suitable for using for a presentation. So I'm going to go for Bookman Old Style. I'm going to make that bold, I think. See what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to go with that. This just shows the examiner you know how to change the text styles, really. Now, that's just a bit of text at the moment. Throughout the Excel part of the exam, we've been talking about putting bold and underline, bold, italic and underline for tiles. When we're doing these ones, I wouldn't do that. What I would do is I would either use a border. This is the same as we do in the PowerPoint. I'd do a border, so I can do that by selecting the object, which is the text box, going to Drawing Tools Format, and then I'm going to just use these two options here. So there's two ways I think of approaching this for simplicity. One is to put a border and a light background color. The other is to use a darker color and lighter text. Either work quite well. So I'm going to do, first off, I'm going to do a border. So go to Shape Outline, and I'm going to pick a color. I'm going to pick dark brown, I think. Okay, and I've got a border around there. I'm going to reselect the box, the text box, and I'm going to change the shape fill. I'm going to pick a sort of yellowy colour up here, the yellowy orangey type colour like that. And I'm going to change my text colour as well to the same brown that I used there. So I'm going to go to Home, change my text colour to this dark brown. Okay, so now I've got something that actually stands out on the page as a tile. So because I've done this, I don't need to put an underline to draw attention to the fact it's a tile. So that's one way of doing it, and that's fine. The important thing is when you select these, you're going to carry some of these ideas through for things like your subheadings as well. If you're doing this, so you might want to use the same brown for your subheading color, for instance. I'm going to change this back now, so I'm going to undo this, put it back to the way it was. There we go. And what I'm going to do is the other thing I said, which is to do a dark background and light text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my text first and make that a light color. I'm going to use this lightest color here. And the reason I do that is it's really hard to see your text once it's the same color as the background. So you can see it just about there. I'm going to now select the text box object. Go to my Drawing Tools format. And this time I'm going to do a shape fill, but I'm going to use a dark color. So I'm using the darkest brown I can there. There we go. And so that gives you a different type of header or tile. Either are suitable, it's down to your taste. Try to use colors that are not very similar in terms of how bright they are. So don't use, for instance, if I use this and change my text color to something like this, it becomes a bit more difficult to read. So try to have a level of contrast between the two. As a tip, this bright yellow works with pretty much any dark color. It works quite well for that. So, all right, I'm going to stick with that. I could make this italic or something, but for this one, I think it's fine. I could put a border on there as well if I wanted, but it'd have to be a very dark border. So let's go to there. I'm going to put a shape out. I'm going to just use a black border on there. Okay, so we've got a tile that's up and running. Now, I've got to get 3 paragraphs on here. And there's an approach I always use for these, which is I want to use the width of the page. So I'm going to look at doing, I'm just going to pop these in just to show you what I mean, but this isn't part of what I want you to do. So I'm going to have one paragraph, approximately a third of the page. I'm going to have another paragraph, approximately a third of the page. And a third paragraph, approximately a third of the page. So that's the way I'm basically going to lay out any of these newsletters, is like that, because generally if you do that it works. It takes the strain off you having to think of how to lay things out, because people do all sorts of weird wonderful things when they're trying to do these. They'll do things like, I'll have a text box over here with some text, and then I'll have another text box here maybe with some text, and then they end up with this situation where then they have to put a text box up here or a text box down here, because you end up with all these big areas of blankness, and also it becomes complicated to read. So, and all that. So this is what I'd recommend you do. Whenever you approach these, always try to do this. Sometimes you might have text that's too small. You might have a list of ingredients and a list of things you need to do. In which case I would just say, okay, let's do that. We'll have 2 boxes side by side, but we're still treating that as one width of the page. Incidentally, I'm going to just delete these. A little tip here, if you want to line these up in the middle of the page and make sure they're the same size and everything, it can be a bit tricky, because you know, do you work out what half this width is here? And so if you're not very good at maths, it's a bit of a pain. But what we've got is, under page design, there's this option for guides. And if you ever have to find the middle of a page, or think of a page that maybe is going to be folded and you want to do the left and right hand side of the fold, use the guides and select the first built-in ruler guides there, the columns with headings. That will put in, I don't know how difficult, how easy it is to see on the video, but when you do it in Publisher, you'll see. That will put in these green lines that are ruler guides. They won't come out on the print, and you don't have to remove them or anything. But if you do want to get rid of one, and I would recommend getting rid of these 2 horizontal ones, because they serve no purpose for what we want to do, just click on that and drag it up to the ruler. Click on that, drag it up to the ruler. So now we've just got the 2 vertical lines. So I can see that actually if I do that, I can drag that box to there. And I can do the same with this one. I'm going to drag it from the side. But as I do that, you'll see this little purple pink line up here. That just tells me that they're lined up. Okay, so now I've got those sitting perfectly fine. So this is what I would do if I had maybe a list of items that I needed to get, because that's obviously not going to fit the whole width of the page. So let's get back to that. I'm going to get rid of these guides. If I want to turn these guides off, I just go to guide, no ruler guide. So I'm going to start looking at the first paragraph. Now remember, let's go back to the question, reread the question. Tom sends out a newsletter to his customers. Your task is to produce the July issue. Remember I said we had to keep that, so let's keep the July issue. I'm going to copy, well, I'm not even going to copy, I'm going to write it out. I'm going to just add that in, but to do that, I can't just copy and paste it. I'm going to insert and then draw a text box. And I'm just going to put that up here, a little text box, and that says July issue. My title font or typeface can be different to the rest, so I'm going to pick a different typeface for this. I'm going to go with Book Antiqua this time. Did I use that last time? I can't remember if I used that. I used Bookman old style, so I'm going to use Book Antiqua for my text. And I'm going to make that as small as I can, which is 10. I might make that bold and italic. There you go. So that just says July issue there. Now I want to put my text in. I'm going to take this first paragraph, which is fine. I've already filled out these answers. Make sure you do these, because this is a really easy point to drop, and you've already done the work. So just make sure you've done those. If you haven't, you can do it after you've pasted in. So I've selected all of that. Be careful when you're selecting. If I select from here, you can see a cursor on the left here. If I click and drag there, what I'll end up with is a blank line at the bottom. And similarly, if I click there and drag down, I'll end up with a blank line at the top. I'll do that just to show you what I mean. So let's have a look. I'm going to just paste that in, and you can see here I've got a blank line. Just select it, go to the beginning of the line and press delete. Now you'll notice my text box has got all these red handles. That just means the text can't fit, but we're not going to use best fit. We're going to select text size, but first thing I want to do is I want to just stretch this text box across the width of the page, and that's about a third, I think, maybe a little bit smaller. Okay, so we've got my text in there. We're seeing some of these red underlines. That usually means there's a spelling error, but sometimes it could be a name of something that's not in the dictionary. But we can see here later people and the two largest producers. We could either right click on those and manually check them. We can also go to review spelling and it will do a spell check. So that's corrected people to people there. And I'm just going to click on change, and then producers is misspelt. I'm going to change that. And it says it's finished checking it. Do you want to check the rest? Yes, please. Now, when I do that, it says Tompe. I know Tompe is correct, so I could either ignore it or I could add it to my dictionary. I'm going to ignore all because I know that's going to be okay. And it says the spelling check's complete. Okay. So now we've got a text. I'm not worried about this space here because I'm going to make my text bigger. First off, I'm going to change my text type to whatever I used recently, and I can see up here the recent ones I used. I used the book Antiqua, and at the moment it's set to 10. Normally for these newsletters and info sheets you want a size between 12 and 14, somewhere between there. So I'm going to go for 12. Okay, so that's got my text in. I'm going to highlight my title and make that look more like a title. Subtitle. I'm going to make that bold, italic, and I'm going to make it the same color as this. So I go here, I use this dark brown. There you go. Okay, I could make that a size bigger if I wanted to as well. Maybe make it stand out a bit more. Now, we've got the text in there, that looks fine. A couple of issues we've got is one is on this right hand side the text is not very well lined up, and if I don't know if you can see here, but Ghana has got a dash at the end of it and broken into two parts, so we need to fix those. In the next video I'm going to just go through how to fix this, what's called hyphenation, and how to do your lineup, how to set this up as columns, and then how to replicate that to save yourself a bit of time, and how to add a picture in.